It's been over a decade since the release of Pokemon X and Y, but it introduced one of the wildest things to come out of a Pokemon game with Mega Evolutions. If you were around that time like I was, you probably remember the hype that came around every Koro magazine to see who would be the next Pokemon to receive a brand new form, only to learn that Flygon never got one. But now with Pokemon Legend ZA on the horizon, that same level of excitement from way back then has reignited with a chance of even more new Mega Evolutions coming to the game. And now with 3 more generations of Pokemon since then, the possibilities are absolutely nuts. But the reality is that some people weren't too fond of Mega Evolution for one big reason, and it was that some of them were just way too good in competitive battles. With a huge buff in stats and upgraded abilities, it turned a lot of Pokemon into absolute machines that dominated multiple formats, which in a lot of cases was a bit unhealthy. But funnily enough, the reason why people hated Mega Evolutions was also the reason why a part of me loved them so much. Yeah, sure, powerful Pokemon like Salamence and Blaziken getting really strong Megas were very annoying, but other Pokemon like Kangaskhan were just never good enough before getting a Mega Evolution. And all of a sudden, they were running rampant to the point where, oh hey, it's a world champion now. And on a solid 6 out of the 8 teams that made top 8 at Worlds that year. And there are much more healthier examples than Kangaskhan. Pokemon like Beedrill, Pinsir, and Pidgeot all were super powerful and a lot more balanced with their Mega Evolution. And I don't think I need to tell you how awful Beedrill is as a Pokemon otherwise. Now with plenty of Pokemon that missed the cut the first time around, and a few new options as well, we're going to be looking at a few Pokemon that, in my opinion, deserve to get a new Mega Evolution in Pokemon Legend ZA. Now for the first one, well, let's just get this one out of the way. I am not sure how Flygon did not get a Mega Evolution already. People love this thing so much, and it was probably the most requested Pokemon to get one. And honestly, it kinda needs it too. When your competition for a fellow dragon and ground type happens to be one of the most broken Pokemon to touch the game, that Game Freak also gave a Mega Evolution to, you need a big reason to justify using Flygon over it. To start off, Flygon's stats are just pretty mediocre. They are well-rounded, which is great, but it does lead to Flygon being underwhelming in all different aspects. For being a 3rd stage evolution, it's honestly pretty embarrassing to have the exact same base attack as when you just hatched out of an egg. It also got a pretty big nerf in Scarlet and Violet when it lost access to the move Defog, which was unfortunate because as a hazard remover in singles, it was actually pretty solid. With the Levitate ability, it was immune to all forms of spikes, and it resisted Stealth Rocks due to it being part ground. However, despite all of this, Flygon does have some things going for it as well. It took a while, but it finally got access to Dragon Dance in Gen 7, which can help a lot with the problem regarding its stats. But the biggest thing it has over other dragon types is the move U-Turn, which helps a lot when committing to using Choice Band and Scarf sets. However, this is still not enough compared to all the other dragon types out there. There is a lot of potential that can be unlocked if Flygon gets a new Mega Evolution, and I think a lot of it comes from its insane special attacking move pool. It gets the obvious Draco Meteors and Earth powers, but it also gets super fun coverage like Heat Wave, Giga Drain, Psychic Noise, and Boom Burst, but they're almost all unusable due to Flygon's really poor special attack. I personally think it would be really funny if they just dumped a ton of points into its special attack, but I think that the stats that come from a new Mega Evolution, regardless of where they go, would be super helpful for Flygon to keep up with its competition, and it would just make a lot of people happy. Now to ride the trend of fan favorites a little bit longer, I want to talk about the Gen 4 fan favorite that has been left in the shadows for far too long. Luxray hasn't gotten an ounce of love in recent years despite being one of the most beloved Route 1 Pokemon, or Route 2 if you want to be technical. If you're watching this, there's a really high chance you caught a Shinx on your first Diamond and Pearl playthrough, and it makes so much sense because of how cool this thing is. But unfortunately, we never actually got to use this thing in real Wi-Fi battles because it was just never good enough. Luxray has 2 really good abilities, with Intimidate to lower the opponent's attack and Guts to increase its own when burnt or poisoned. And its stats are all pretty good except for one. That terrible speed stat, man. I really think Luxray could have been so much better if it was just a bit faster. Although that may not be true considering there are other problems as well. It always struggled when it came to having really bad physical electric type moves to take advantage of that high attack stat. The funny thing about its best physical electric move, Wild Charge, is that even with Stab, it's still slightly weaker than a Facade after a burn. But thankfully in Scarlet and Violet, Luxray got a new and very risky physical electric type move in Supercell Slam, which hits at base 100, but if you miss, you're losing 50% of your health. So yeah, it's essentially just an electric type jump kick. This unfortunately still wasn't enough to to bring it up in usage, as Luxray still struggles to this day, being among the worst Pokemon in every game it's in. Even just little unfortunate things like being added in the same generation as Garchomp and having to deal with Flanders one generation later is just all extra salt in the wound. As to why I think Luxray needs a Mega Evolution, I just think it deserves to be good at least one time. But when it comes to what it would need, honestly, well, it could use a lot, including maybe a new type to help give it some versatility and a new niche. And I know there's a lot of discourse on whether or not Luxray should be a dark type, which I think would still be super cool. And if you think it doesn't make sense, then let me know in the comments what type you think Luxray should be, because to tell you the truth, I can't think of another one. Now, before we keep going, I need 1 second to talk about today's sponsor, me. These videos take a lot of time and hard work to make, so if you enjoyed it so far, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, if there was one generation of Pokemon that got screwed over when it came to new Megas, it has to be Gen 5. If you guys didn't know, throughout the entirety of Gen 6, only one Pokemon from the Black and White era received a Mega Evolution, and it was arguably the worst Mega of them all, which, hey, as a Gen 4 kid, sucks to suck. I'm not sure if there was a clear-cut answer as to why this was the case, but it's honestly a shame. Gen 5 had a ton of cool designs and fan favorites, but a lot of these Pokemon were already really strong, and while I'm pretty sure nobody in their right mind would want to experience a world with Mega Ferrothorn, I still think there are some pretty cool Pokemon from Gen 5 that would really appreciate a Mega Evolution. The one we'll be talking about today is a pretty controversial Pokemon all around. Chandelure has always been a Pokemon with a very mixed reception. It gets a ton of love from games like Pokken and Pokemon Unite, and while some may love its aesthetic, a lot of people are just not fans of the fact that it's just a spooky chandelier. Chandelure, when it first came out, proved to be threatening with its base 145 special attack. With its strong fire and ghost type attacks, it excelled in breaking powerful defensive walls, and while its speed was not the greatest, it made up for it usually with a choice scarf, granting a 1.5 times speed boost at the cost of locking you into the first move you choose. Shandy's fall from grace, if people want to call it that, was a bit gradual, and it's still not bad in my opinion, but I think power creep has been catching up to it, as it would be the case with many Pokemon in this video. As new Pokemon are becoming faster, and with more powerful fire and ghost type Pokemon being introduced, Chandelure has been left in a weird spot where it's just outclassed in everything it does. It also just doesn't help that its abilities don't do much for the most part, since they're all pretty niche. Infiltrator is nice to break through substitute and screens, and Flash Fire is a cool option to punish opposing Pokemon going for fire moves. But they are both very situational abilities that may not come up super frequently, so they could be pretty hit or miss. Realistically, I don't think Chandelure needs much to become great again, but it would really love something like a Mega Evolution to give it that small edge over other fire and ghost types. With a small buff in speed and a better ability, I actually think this thing could be really good. It doesn't even have to be something super offensive, maybe something funny like Perish Body, which I forgot was an ability and probably why I went with it, but Chandelure is a ghost type, so maybe it makes sense, I don't know. Now, looking back in Pokemon Legends Arceus, we do notice that the game's Pokédex has a deep focus on Pokemon from the first 4 generations of the game, so we could assume that the same thing is gonna happen in Pokemon Legends ZA, focusing on Kalos and all the generations that came before it, and it's why I put a deep focus on that so far. But in Arceus, there were still a select few Pokemon from future generations that got added, along with getting some love in the form of new Hisuian forms. So what if a Pokemon that came after Gen 6 got a Mega Evolution? Who would it be? Well, luckily you don't have to think too hard, because there's one Pokemon out there that stood out to me like no one else did. Mega Mousehole! Okay, jokes aside, there are a ton of great options that I would love to see personally. Between Lycanroc, Frostmoth, heck, we could turn Palossand into a giant sandcastle if we wanted to. But the Pokemon I'm choosing to talk about today is a bit of an odd pick in Serena. Serena has always been a Pokemon that stood out with tons of potential in my opinion. She got a pretty cool gimmick during her debut in Sun and Moon with the ability Queenly Majesty, which protects both Serena and her ally from all priority attacks from opposing Pokemon. With this ability, good stats all around, and really good coverage and utility moves like high jump kick, rapid spin, and triple axle, Serena has filled a niche for itself that helps it stand out from many other grass types in the format. Despite not being a popular choice, it has seen some play mainly in VGC, where it found itself to be a great partner on Kyogre teams. To explain how it works, Kyogre is great at just deleting things with Water Spout, which does more damage the more HP it has. But as a water type, it does have bad matchups into 2 really powerful Pokemon in Rillaboom and Raging Bolt, who both have access to strong super effective priority moves moves that can lower its HP or even knock it out before it can even attack. This, of course, is where Serena's Queenly Majesty ability comes into play, as it stops that problem while also benefiting from the rain that Kyogre provides, so it could take less damage from super effective fire moves. And while this core is really powerful, that's mainly where her niche ends, because besides this, Serena doesn't see much play anywhere else. It always faced heavy competition from Pokemon with Psychic Surge, since Psychic Terrain also blocked priority moves. And now in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we got Farigiraf, which got its own version of Serena's ability, but is also just less niche and more splashable on teams. And while I do think niche Pokemon like Serena are super cool to have, it would be really nice to see it get a Mega Evolution for a few reasons. One, a lot of people just really like Serena, including me. Two, it would be a really good excuse to finally make an ability that boosts the power of kicking moves. I feel like it's something that's way overdue at this point. We've had Iron Fist in this game for 5 generations now, and we just got Sharpness instead all of a sudden. And hey, I like that ability too, and I'm glad it made Gallade great, but man, I don't know, this is just something I've been asking for a while now. Regardless, I just think that Serena getting a Mega Evolution would be super cool and would definitely make a lot of people happy. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Anyways, those are a few Pokemon I think deserve Mega Evolutions in Pokemon Legends ZA. Obviously, we don't know if Mega Evolution will ever return to the main series games ever again, but it's still super fun to speculate and theory craft. And I know for a fact that you're thinking of a Pokemon right now that I didn't cover. So please let me know in the comments who you think deserves a new Mega Evolution in Pokemon Legends ZA. I do read through all of your comments and I love to hear everyone's thoughts. But until then, thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!